Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer-songwriter, guitarist Vinny Peculiar. Also Alan Wilkes, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, all that other groovy stuff. He's just got a new album out that was titled Peculiarities. He's been releasing a huge amount of albums in the last 10 years. He's slightly done his career back to front, as you'll find out in this interview. Anyway, he's worked with members of the Smiths, OASIS, Aztec Camera and The Fall, which you'll also find out about in this interesting chat. Anyway, after several minutes of getting to know each other, as you do in showbiz, we started waxing lyrically about David Bowie and, yes, our first loves. And, yes, basically I told him everything I loved about David Bowie. My first single was Changes. No, it wasn't. It was Space Oddity with Changes and Velvet Goldmine on the B-side. Anyway, Vinny then just stormed in with his kind of take on David Bowie. And from there, the conversation just gets better and better. Anyway, look, Vinny, take it away.
I mean, I was just a kind of 69 to 80 kind of obsessive with Bowie. I didn't really like Let's Dance as much as a lot of my friends, and but I prefer Tin Machine to Let's Dance. I thought just because it was ambitious and out there.
Yes.
But I didn't. I had the album. He got a bit of a hard time in the 80s, Bowie, press-wise, and we always loved to do that because he was like the Beatles of the 70s with all the changes and the evolution and the styles and the Berlin and, you know, some of the choice of musicians were just perfect for his kind of maverick.
Unbelievable musicians. So what was your moment, the formative moment that you know changed your life?
Musically?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose when I was really young, I loved Paul Simon and Garfunkel probably was my first thing because I'd learned to play guitar when I was like 11 or 12, and I grew up in quite a religious household. My father was a church organist. Mom did the choir. My granddad was like a radical preacher, Methodist, sort of thou shalt not drink kind of.
Right.
Chant. So I grew up with all that, and so music for me was often about performing at church and performing hymns. Obviously, I had hymns every week from age whatever to 14, and my dad said when I was 14, you still want to go? You don't have to now if you don't want to. I said no. Back. But I mean, that's not to say that that kind of music hasn't had an influence. But in terms of getting excited about music, it was probably I got the Bridge Over Troubled Water album in 1970 from Kay's catalogue. My mum got it for me, and that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And you had all the T-Rex singles that were also, you know, in the whole Top of the Pops thing.
Because I've spoken to it.
You know, eureka moment, I think, with Bowie doing Starman, because it just seemed that all of a sudden music wasn't just about song, it was about where does he come from? You know, how can you look and behave like that? And it was just, it sort of opened up something, I think, in lots of kids.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those.
School, you know.
It was definitely quite a moment. And did you, I mean, because I spoke to a few American musicians who came from Christian religious backgrounds, and they couldn't do music at all, you know, rock and roll, anything like that. I mean, they were quite probably extreme. They had to have prayer meetings. They had to see people to say, look, you know, they want to listen to this record. Is it the work of the devil? I mean, in the UK, I know it's a bit extreme, but it was true.
Quite the same for me. It wasn't oppressive in that sense for me. It didn't. My dad didn't approve of any rock and roll or anything like that, but you know, I still got an electric guitar and annoyed the hell out of them.
Right. So they're probably America's probably.
They weren't. It wasn't quite like a controlling evangelical.
Right. Yes.
It was much more laid back than that, but that's the world they were very involved with. You know, my dad sort of just offered me a way out, and I took it.
Yes. Was it a generally supportive family?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Yeah.
Yes.
So you've only really got one to compare to, probably. So yeah.
Yes. Well, I did hear one of your songs that you did recently, which was quite grim. Just jumping. The Suicidal Dad.
Oh yeah, that Suicidal Dad was a song that I did a number of years ago now, probably 2001, 2002, when it was recorded. But that came out of an experience in the Manchester support group for the Child Support Agency, where there was a suicide. That's where that came from.
Oh, crikey. Okay.
So, one of the lads there killed himself. So that just completely resonated with me. And then 5 years later, the lyric talks about the CSA just briefly in it as well, which is a massive governmental cock-up, both for absent parents and for parents. It was just a way of control and contain and taking money off people, assessing people for ridiculous amounts of money that they didn't have, to pay in maintenance.
I know.
Yeah. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So then there's the 70s, because you had the Bowie thing, but when you really think about it, at that time, the 60s obviously had just happened, and we had the Beatles, Stones. It was kind of quite a macho culture as well, wasn't it? And then that party had finished. The 70s came along, you had the glam. So I would imagine those people must have looked at Bowie and T-Rex at that stage and thought, God, this is just hideous, really. They couldn't have been that impressed with them. And also, I spoke to quite a lot of the people who were part of that 60s scene and said, well, what happened to you in the 70s? Because frankly, you weren't there. And they said, we were quite tired, we were knackered, and several people died, or it like any party that you stay at for too long, you often realize you should have left before it gets kind of really messy. So Bowie must have become, they must have looked at Bowie and thought, well, this isn't the Jefferson Airplane, this isn't Hendrix, the Doors. He must have looked a bit cheap, a bit like Bros or something. I don't know. But then you had the sort of the birth of kind of the Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and denim jeans. So where were you fitting in with that sort of scene?
I suppose I got into heavy rock briefly, but once punk came around, I abandoned all that, probably in the name of musical fashion, like I think a lot of people did. I read The Enemy. That was pretty much my source material that jumped me off into reading other books. So if Robert Smith had read The Outsider by Albert Camus, I had to read it, kind of thing. So The Enemy actually served as a sort of platform for inspiration. I read a lot of The Enemy. And ended up going to various, sort of punky gigs, Birmingham Barbarolla's, CD Club. I was in Birmingham then. I was working as a nurse, so I was starting to play small punky gigs in hospitals for people with learning disabilities and people with long-term psychiatric problems.
Blimey, that's cool.
They're always interesting gigs.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did the musical kind of career start to sort of develop a bit more then during the 80s?
Only really when I moved to Liverpool in the mid-80s. Before that, I had I was in a couple of bands, but I was also a young parent and trying to keep a family together. And so I was in a couple of arty bands that did occasional gigs, but we didn't really have the wherewithal to do that much in my early 20s. Although I was writing a lot of lyrics, I thought I was a bit of a poet in those days, but I'm not really sure whether I was. I've got a ton of stuff. I've actually done that. When you kind of go back and look at this load of stuff you thought was great, and then you reread it like 30 years' time, and you think, well, maybe I wasn't the new Ted Hughes after all.
Well, it's probably a good thing. I mean, his kind of track record with relationships wasn't great.
That's true.
But
then John Cooper Clarke had a bit of an influence. I like John Cooper Clarke.
Yes. And during that period, because a lot of bands that I've interviewed, especially the early 80s, you know, Thatcher got in 79, you know, we'd had the sort of punk, that post-punk period, indie pop started to really sort of develop. You know, personally, you know, the Smiths in 83, you know, was just a big moment. And then, you know, you'd had that Liverpool sound that had come out of Eric's and a band called Death School, and big in Japan with all that bunch like Bill Drummond and sort of Holly Johnson. Were you, you know, sort of looking at music as a sort of a potential career path, or were you always quite kind of thinking?
I was a student nurse in the early 80s, so yeah, I mean, I have vivid memories of getting the bus to work every day with a brand new Sony Walkman, listening to Smith's record.
Yes.
I mean, I was a Smiths obsessive, for sure, in the early days, in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And the guitar style and just the whole lyricism. I still think Morrissey, in spite of his current sort of oddness, is a wonderful lyricist. And he has a wonderful way of taking things to the edge. And they're great, those early Smiths records. Well, I like all the albums. I like Hatful of Hollow especially, you know, which is Peel sessions and that stuff.
Well, that was probably the first album that I got from them. And I preferred it because the first album didn't do anything for me at all. And I still think it sounds a bit cheap.
Yeah, it sounds like, I suppose it's the way it's been recorded quickly, and it sounds a little demo-ish and a little undynamic.
I find it flat, whereas Hatful of Hollow was the one that was...
With the gloom in some of those songs, you know, the dream is gone, but the baby is real. What's that one? The river, the colour of...
blood.
Immerse the baby's head, that one.
Yes.
It's the darkest of things.
I know, the Moors murders.
Somehow I listened to that over and over again, I remember.
Yes. So then as the 80s progressed, because as I mentioned, my theory here, 83 to 87, indie pop was really ruling the airwaves. Well, it was on the indie charts. Obviously, we had the Bundu Boys and LL Cool J, because anything that John Peel played, I'd sort of tried to own a copy. Then 87 came along, and you had sort of the breakup of the Smiths, and the party felt again like it was kind of over. And then, you know, Ecstasy came, and then so everyone wanted to sound a bit like the Happy Mondays and Stone Roses and Primal Scream. So how were you developing at that stage?
Well, I was working in social care, giving out bottles of water at Cream. I had a sense of social responsibility in those days.
Yes.
No, I was working in Liverpool, and one of the things in a team that included social workers and nurses, and I kind of we ended up rotating in and out of Cream because people were dying basically of ecstasy, and nobody really knew how to manage it. And I think the actual strengths were so variable. I know that makes, you know, I'm sure a lot of rock and roll interviews sort of glorify and talk very eloquently about the joys of ecstasy, but, you know, for me it wasn't that. I didn't like the music either particularly. I think it's just repetitive, and I mean, it's probably great if you're taking loads of drugs, which they say is, you know, every music era has its drug connections, but yeah, so that's what I was doing in the late 80s. I was also writing songs, and started, I was in Liverpool then, and I started a couple of bands that did a load of recording without really releasing anything, because I think in those days people were chasing the big record deal. So we were always down in London meeting people from various publishing companies and big record labels, and we were almost there, or, you know, it wasn't quite working. So I've still got a load of stuff I suppose I could put out at some point from that era, but I haven't really done that. But from sort of the early 90s, I some of the stuff I'd been recording then and earlier just made it onto the first Vinny Peculiar album, and then just started putting stuff out there.
Did you feel that when did you get your name?
Where did I get it?
No, when did it happen?
Probably in about 1991, 92. No, maybe 3, 4. I can't remember. Must be probably 90, maybe 95, something like that. I started doing solo gigs, and it was a name I could use for band gigs and solo gigs. But it wasn't a plan to, excuse me, it wasn't a plan to be called Vinny, though, and Mike Joyce from the Smiths made sure he made his views very clear, because they didn't want to call me Alan Wilkes. He wanted the eccentric singer. He said, I can't call you that. And I said, am I? Oh, all right then. And we kind of slowly, people started to call me Vinny, and that was probably Smith's lads were in the band 2004 to, well, Andy left kind of a couple of years later, and then Mike stayed till about 2009.
Yes.
Mike's still a great friend of mine, even though we do say we're great friends and still seeing each other and chatting on the phone regularly, because we never made any money in a band. Which is probably true, because, you know, he's had the opposite experience, obviously, as you know.
Yes, absolutely.
He's been in, yeah.
Because I suppose, do people get slightly mixed up with you, Vinny Peculiar, Vinny Riley? Do they go, oh, right?
Yes, I did. I once have
a whole interview.
No, not a whole interview. A 4-star independent review. You think the Independent would know better? I can't remember the journalist, but it was raving on about this album I did, and just, you know, dropped the dirty column in at the end, and, you know, it sort of took away all my quote potential. I can't use it. It was like, I got in touch with, I think it was Gavin Martin. It might have been Gavin Martin in the. No, it wasn't Gavin. It was. I can't think who it was.
My God, it did once happen to me, actually, on an interview, because I was wanting to get a member of the fire engines from Scotland.
I remember the fire engines.
Yeah, well, I thought, I found this guy, Davey Henderson. And I got hold, I said, do you want to do an interview? He said, yeah, that's great. I thought, brilliant, you know. And I thought, strange, he's not Scottish, but anyway, it doesn't matter, you know. And then it turned, and halfway through this moment, I'll just tell you, it was like, oh God, it's David Henderson. And he's like, no, I wasn't in the fire engines. It's like, because his whole career, he was in a band called Disco Duck or something like that, with the guy who went on to form Food. No, he didn't form, he was part of Food Records and signed Blur. And this guy went on, his career, you know, indie band, went on, became part of that whole world of EMAP and rock magazines, works for Cherry Red Records now. And it's like,
oh, well, I was on Cherry Red, I might know him.
David Henderson. And so anyway, he was in a band which was not the Fire Engine. I just remember having that, I went, oh my God, I suddenly, right, yeah, okay, let's...
Everything you prepared, you suddenly have to kind of almost ad-lib into another world.
It's like, I think you realise I've made a mistake, but let's pretend that's fine. So luckily I didn't start with, tell me about the dirty column. That would have been a crisis. So look, how did you then, because with, you know, the people you've worked with...
I supported the Durity column on a little tour once, so really, really nice.
Yes, I have to say, I saw a picture of Vinny recently. He does look very thin, doesn't he? And old.
I think, well, from what just talking to people, he's always been a bit fragile. You know, he does look a little fragile, but he's quite resilient in his own way, apparently.
Well, yes. Well, you get to that age, don't you? So when did you? Was the 90s then? Trying to get an idea. So the 90s came along. We had grunge, then we had Britpop, we had shoegazing. So all the way through your musical career, have you always stuck with you know, like I was talking to Amelia Fletcher, she's, you know, she was in Tallulah Gosh, she's in Heavenly, she's been in a million bands, but she's always had a day job at the UEA, actually, she's been a lecturer. So did you always have that same...
Pretty much.
I'm not giving my day job up because frankly, the fun bit doesn't make any money.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the number of phone calls I've taken from friends working in studios saying, oh, this is it. You know, V2 are going to sign us. They're coming up on Monday. They absolutely love it. You should give up your job now. Come on. And I'm thinking, you know what? I did that years ago in the 80s. I gave up a job briefly for about a year, and then I got my old job back in a hospital. And so I never quite did. What I did do in about 2000 is start working part-time. So that allowed me time to do shows and hang on to a bit of sanity. Well, I'm not
Yes.
really trying to. It's what I was doing then. I was either nursing, face-to-face contacts in the community, psychiatry, and learning disability, and then I went on to do other NHS jobs. I ended up as a mental health commissioner, which sounds very grand, but isn't really. It ended up in spreadsheet hell, budgets, and liaison with local authorities and panels and funding, and I ended up quite remote from people, and that isn't as much fun, to be fair.
No,
So
no.
I was glad that I got out early. I got out when I was 50.
It's very tricky. You have to sort of go to those workshops, don't you, about how to manage budgets.
Oh God, yeah. It wasn't my natural.
So have you always, with your musical career, have you always been the front man? Have you always wanted to be the front person?
Well, I quite like just the idea of being a guitar player. I really love guitars. I always seem to be buying a new guitar or selling an old one. So I just seemed to end up in bands where I was sort of, oh, you can do it, I can write. He's always got his head in a book. You can do that, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah, you can write the words. Can you do that, can't you? Yeah, okay then. I just ended up. I think once you start writing songs, you can get on quite a roll. I could. Even now, I write fairly quickly. I get last 3 or 4 records I've done. I've had a concept in my head, and I can kind of write 20 songs in a month if I put my head to it, and
yes,
demo them, and get the band in, rehearse them, make a record.
So when with David Bowie, I sort of was looking at his career, a while back, and thought, God, he's done an album a year during the 70s and produced others and relocated, had lots of relationships. Your years were quite phenomenal, weren't they? Did something click during 2001 when you brought out Iron in the Soul?
Yeah, I suppose what clicked was I finally thought I really, I think I'd spent up until that point thinking I was like Bromsgrove's answer to David Bowie. Why doesn't somebody discover me? And then I think you finally realise you have to do more than that. You can't live in your own bubble.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm quite an insular person, so I'm quite good on my own. And I just kind of expected something that I wasn't really connecting or working towards. So I wasn't going and hanging out with the right people. I'm not really a hanger-outer of.
No.
I go and see the gig, but then I don't want to go to a nightclub then and take loads of drugs, or I've just never been that sort of person. I'm not much of a natural fit with that side of rock and roll. The fit I enjoy is actually the performance and thinking about it and thinking about the ideas behind what the music is. But I'm never really. I'm not much of a licker.
Yes, and who are Hug Records?
That sounds a bit of a selfish way of looking at things, but.
Well, it's a good one. And Hug Records, was this one that you developed, or was this kind of?
No, it was Space's record label in Liverpool. Space, right. The band. I recorded in the same building as Space.
Yes.
Quite a lot, and with a producer called Rob Ferrier. And we struck up a really good relationship, and I think he did 3 or 4 albums with me, Rob. And so he finally realised there's no money in the music industry, and that's not a proper job. Which, of course, he constantly regrets leaving, but he's now in a situation where he can't come back. It's a tough game, I think. The economic realities of the music industry, even. Now with COVID and everything else, people are just. The number of people that are going to suffer. You've got tech crews, stage hands, sound engineers, studios. Actually, studios. I was in studio last 3 days, and studios are allowed to open. So we I'm finishing off another album for next year. So that was a really good experience. But yeah, most people, just gigging musicians, a number of my friends gig more than me in various bands, just had no income. So it's pretty tough.
Yes, I know. I sort of realise I haven't spoken to quite a lot of people, especially who've tried to keep music going. They've really had to do that one moment where they do Europe, for 30 gigs in 30 days because of the economics. But, doing Germany and definitely Germany, is kind of economically essential for them to keep, surviving. And
that's been taken away.
And that's also
it's
gone.
not just the gigs, it's the merch as well. So
yes.
If you normally press up 2,000 CDs on your first go, or even 1,000, whatever you normally do, you can usually get, the aim is to get rid of them. But now, of course, there's no way to get rid of them. And selling at gigs is really important to musicians.
Yeah, and that T-shirt. So when did you start? How did you manage to work with so many amazing other musicians?
Well, I just started doing gigs on my own in Manchester, and we had a club night called the Kitchen Sink Disco. Booked Andy Rourke. He came. Yeah, are you talking about how did I end up with the Smiths in my band?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. He came and liked it. Brought Mike along the next time, and I performed, and then went to Mike's and rehearsed, and it didn't seem. I mean, millions of people kept banging on to me but we just kind of got along as musicians. They're regardless of who they've been with, they're good players, and it was the same for me. I just did what I usually did, sent them my demos, and we came to rehearsal and put our ideas into the pot, and that was it.
Yeah.
I made an album with Mike, which was great. Made a single with Andy and Mike, recorded in Sweden. Because we toured with Soundtrack of Our Lives, who were a great live band from Sweden, with a big Sony record 4-album deal. So we did a few shows with them, and they were great.
Yes.
So that was a good period. Before that, I worked with Bill Drummond. Did I tell you that?
No.
Bill Drummond connection is the funny one, really. No, not funny, but I got this gig. I was an artist in residence at the Cathedral Arts Festival in Belfast, which ran for 2 weeks, which is a really nice little gig. Basically, they flew me to Belfast, and I lived in a flat for 2 weeks and compared all the shows. And I was comparing and playing gigs every night. And during the day, there was a lot of different art events, and I was involved in. And Bill was there as well. So I was artist in residence musical, and he was artist in residence visual. And so we did stuff together. And he had this project called the Soup Line, which you may come across. He draws an imaginary line on a map, asks people to get in touch with him, and then he turns up at their house. This was his project at the time, turning up at people's houses and making them soup. They're invariably kind of middle-class arty houses with interested people. We can get Bill Drummond around. He's going to make us some soup. No. Yes, he is. Anyway, Bill then would turn up and do the speech. Oh, Tim, go away.
Oh, you've gone a bit quiet.
Hello? Tim?
Hello, Alan.
I'm in the middle of something. I'm in the middle of an interview, Tim. Can I just push end? I'll talk to you later.
Have you got your trousers on?
I've got my trousers on. Okay. I'll see you later.
God, keep your trousers on.
I thought anyway, Bill Drummond was he was great. So I spent a couple of weeks in a flat with him. We lived in the same flat. And the thing that struck me most about Bill was he was so sincere. Everyone has him down as an arts prankster, but he's actually a very sincere artist with some very determined mode of operandi.
Yes, blimey.
Yeah, it's interesting. So at these soup gigs, he'd do the talk, tell everyone why he'd come to make soup. They couldn't believe it. His answer was, well, it's just a nice thing to do. and they were like pressing for more artistic reasons that he couldn't give them. And then he handed over to me, and I played, 5, 6, however many songs I played, I can't remember, and then peddled my wares and sold CDs, and that was it.
Oh, that's an amazing little
It was a
project.
little time. I probably did like 15, 20 gigs with Bill like that.
Yeah.
Got boring though, eating the soup. After a while, I said, you got any bread and butter? I don't really want. I'll just eat the bread. Because it's the same meal. He's got this old, probably Presbyterian church recipe for vegetable soup that he was applying at the time.
So just to get that right, he would knock on someone's door, tell them this project.
Knock on the door. Basically, he put flyers out in libraries to say, if you live on this line, this is the soup line. It's a line between Belfast and Nottingham, which he drew on a map. I'm not sure why Nottingham. I'm not sure why Belfast. But anyway, drew a line on the map, and all the places that cropped up on that map, I think what he must have done is posted off some flyers to various libraries,
right,
on the soup line, or put done some kind of email group email, because I think by then he would have had 2004. He'd have a mailing list.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you just turned up. They obviously were aware that you were turning up.
Yeah, they had assembled like 20 people who were interested in having soup made for them by Bill.
So how long did that?
People like to talk to him about, the KLA.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And other projects. But I mean, I tried to get him to do What Time Is Love acoustically with me at pretty much every gig. Should we do it now? No. I've rung him a few times and said things like, what about, can you just be executive producer? You don't have to do anything. I'll put your name on the album sleeve. It'll look great. And he spent 20 minutes telling me why it would look great, and then 20 minutes telling me why he couldn't do it. I knew he couldn't do it anyway. Because he's got too many rules. I mean, when I met him, I said, I gave him a couple of CDs. He said, I can listen to them. It's this year I'm listening to P's and B's. And P, I can put you in Peculiar. What do you mean? He said, that's it. If it doesn't begin with a P or a B in 2004, I'm on P's and B's. I can't listen to it. And I said, why not? I said, I can't. It's the rules. So for every year this is about Bill's psyche, about creating his own sort of rules. It's quite interesting. It's like, I mean, the project after that was called The 17. I don't know whether you've come across that, but he got 17 people together in a room, recorded them, and then deleted them.
Right.
They joined the 17, which is, I think it was the 17 because it's a magical age. You're not quite an adult and you're not quite a teenager. But so they were interesting times. I did some 17s as well, but I don't want to bore you with too much Bill Drummond stuff.
No, but it was interesting because Alice Cooper did, was it 18? 18. I'm not quite a man, I'm not quite a boy.
Yes, yeah.
It was one of those. So anyway, Bill went for 17 instead. So
yeah, his book was called The 17.
Yeah, I do love that thing about having, I couldn't do it myself, but having rules is quite extraordinary, really. Sort of.
It's not unlike The Dice Man.
Pardon?
Have you ever read The Dice Man?
No, but I've sort of come across the synopsis of it and sort of
the concept of it, where everything's out of your control. It's controlled by something else.
I don't know. When I realised what it was about, I thought, oh, that's fine. I don't need to read it. So look, coming then to the new album. God, sorry, you've got such an interesting, your CV and the work you've done. It's kind of fascinating at the same time, isn't it? Because it's kind of unusual. Mostly people do the stuff when they're between the ages of 18 to 25.
Yeah. I often think I'm in reverse.
You've done it in the reverse. And as I sort of found with most of these bands, especially from the 80s, they had the unemployment period, job seekers allowance, which gave them that kind of 1 year of being almost given a grant, so they would form a band. do the single, give it to John Peel would give them a session, they'd do the album, things going well, do the tour around all these art centres and or club nights around Britain. Second album comes, they're really fed up with each other, they split up basically, doesn't it? You know, that's the kind of general gig, because, you know, the rock and roll world has been really fantastic, but they've made no money, they hate each other, and they don't really care about the second or third album anymore, and that's kind of the life of it.
If they do it, it's just a rehash of the first two, but not as good.
It's not, and there's no kind of game plan, which kind of gave me such an amazing, like, God, how did people like David Bowie do it? Even, you know, people like you too, obviously, you know, started at that point, but then kept going and managed to pass. But then a lot of the people that I've interviewed lately have sort of come back into music, or have sort of chilled out a bit and then sort of started releasing albums. So you've completely done it the other way, and playing with all these people that you must have seen in the 80s must have felt a little bit strange.
It did feel a bit strange sometimes with the Smiths lads. Well, with Bonehead as well. I had a band with Bonehead a few years ago called ParlourFlames, and that was kind of strange too, because it's always a double-edged sword when well-known people join your band, because as far as you're all concerned, you're all kind of mates together, you know. I mean, even now, you know, Bone rang me a few weeks ago and said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I've got this gig. It's a local gig, but it's a good one, and I think it's going to sell out." He said, "Oh, yeah, I'm at the Hollywood Bowl with Liam." You know, so it's like, "Oh, right, okay. Well, you're there. I'm here. That's good. That's good." You know, and but that was just like a normal conversation about two mates talking about what they're doing.
Yes.
I actually did feel like this, but I don't think he did. You know, he's just like talking quite happily about, and you know, I think we're all with Mike and Andy and everyone. Everyone was kind of in as an equal. But then you get in the real world and say, I mean, I just remember doing in Manchester. They have a Smiths tour. Smiths and Morrissey tour, and I was at Salford Lads Club, and at the end of the tour they had 2 or 3 coaches of fans, Smiths fans, turn up at the Lads Club, and they're all sat down in the gym there, and I basically lead the gig, and Andy and I are playing on acoustic guitars Smiths songs. Obviously I'm doing all the vocals. We're doing 3 Vinny Peculiar songs and 3 Smiths songs. Goes down an absolute storm. It's wonderful. And,
yes.
Have a great time. And then 250 people surged forward past me to have a picture taken with the real reason they're there. So it was like, there was a little bit of that going on. Oh yeah, I kind of get it now. It's nothing. It doesn't matter how good my songs are. It's not for a certain hardcore connected.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, I did big bands. We did. I remember Big Man Strikes Again and a few others. I really loved playing that. It's a great song.
Yeah.
And then of course Craig joined the band as well. So Craig Gannon was in the band for quite a while.
Yeah, because I did an interview with Craig kind of a few months ago, which was quite an amazing story, because he's such
Craig's
a nice
stories, isn't he? Yeah.
He's such a nice guy, but his experience with the Smiths sounded bloody like something from The Godfather. When you said, you know, it's almost like you said, you know, it's not personal, the fans surge past you to find, you know, the other members of the band, you know.
Oh, did that happen to Craig as well? Yeah.
Well, I suppose they had the Smiths at that point were pretty alive, weren't they? And it was happening, but it wasn't happening, so to speak. And so they kind of ended up, he didn't have a great experience with them, did he?
No. I mean, he had a great relationship with Mike, I think, though. It's Mike that got him in the band.
Yeah. And I think...
So I can't play like...
Yes. But
both the guitars at once, and so I invariably do the recording, and then Craig came in.
And with your own guitar playing, did that change over the decades as well, when you were both listening to different music and also releasing albums, plus playing with all these different members of other bands?
Yeah, my guitar playing has changed a lot, and I'm still one that will play a certain style for a certain kind of tune. So I've got on this new album, which is much more rock based, you know, I wig out, you know, like I used to try and do when I was 15.
Yes.
No, I do. I have my Richie Blackmore moments and all that kind of. And I had an antipathy towards that style for a long time, based on, you know, that was the dinosaur age, and then punk came along, and then just when Johnny Marr came along, that was quite a revelation, because I love the way he plays. I love the sort of jangishness of his parts. They're kind of they're big, but they're spacey, and yeah, rather than just, you know, your full-on Thin Lizzy type guitar.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think there's a space for it all. You know, it just depends on the songs, really.
Yeah. Well, there actually one band that had that space was the Chameleons. They had a very stadium-based sound. They weren't like this little gig, you know, like indie band who wanted to play in
They
front
had
of.
a lot of jangling guitars, didn't they, going on? They had a very similar style to Johnny Marr in some ways.
Yes. So with your new release, this is kind of unreleased material that you've been getting through the archives. When did you start putting this together?
The peculiarities, right?
Yes.
Well, it just seemed like a time to do it, because I wasn't doing any gigs. I only did put it together this year. And I actually left out a lot of stuff from the 90s, which I'm going to do as a separate project. But I had, you know, alternative versions of stuff, particularly the ParlourFlames songs that we ended up putting out. I think me and Bone spent too long producing them. So I think there was too much sheen on them. So
right.
I had some earlier mixes which I thought sounded better. Spoke to him and he said fine. So I just put them out in my sort of package.
Yes.
Peculiarity. So there's some. It's got the ParlourFlames ones, and there's just, you know, whenever you're recording, there's always one that doesn't quite fit on with an album. So that's how that Peculiarities just came out.
Basically, this is what we've all done this year, isn't it? Go through the.
I had a little bit more time to think. Well, I haven't got any gigs, so, you know, I've been writing songs. I mean, I wrote this new album in lockdown. It's coming out next year. So,
is this the one that's titled "Artists Only"?
Yes, it's a. You're going to tell me you know it's a Talking Heads song, aren't you?
Yeah.
But, it fits the kind of brief. So, because of the concept album kind of scenario I've done for the last 2 or 3 albums, I did a concept album set in a psychiatric hospital, which I didn't expect to do when I left the NHS, called Silver Meadows. Then I moved back from the north to the Midlands and wrote a Worcestershire concept album called Return of the Native. And then I wrote an angry album called While You Still Can, that was fueled a little bit by political craziness, Brexit. And then this new album, I've gone back to more familiar territory, which is like an album about art.
Yeah.
Artists. So I've got David Hockney, Francis Bacon. Who else have I got? Jackson Pollock. And I've got other art-related lyrics as well. I've got one called Art School as well, about art school music, which sounds like art rock, basically.
Like Deaf School.
Yeah. There's a sort of scratchy, sort of frenetic.
Yes. Well, there were several bands I've done. There was a band called the Fabulous Poodles, and then there was Deaf School, and they were both kind of influential, and apparently they were brilliant live. But when you hear the record, you think, yeah, I can see why you didn't sell many. It's kind of like you wouldn't sit down and listen to it at home. God, that's a terrible thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes artists are so arsey, they don't really want to be produced. That sometimes happens.
Yes. So with your previous...
You've got lots of energy. I mean, if the Pistols didn't work with, you know, the right producers, they wouldn't have sounded.
No, they would sound rubbish.
They could have been all hype and no sound, but, you know, when you heard it, you thought, oh yeah, it's massive, it's huge.
It's got a good producer. But look, on your previous album, you did one like Diane Abbott, who obviously was a very interesting character in the Labour Party. I mean, how did that song came about?
Well, it's not really me picking on Diane Abbott, to be fair. I quite like Diane Abbott, but the whole, I mean, there's a certain vanity of political culture now, which is very different to how it used to be. So I think there's a massive, almost an over important sense of drama around image and this constant need to share and feed your social media
Platforms.
And your PR is almost more important than your policy. So so that's it's a song about the vanity of politics, because I think sometimes Trump is just a classic example of his vanity is beyond anything he stands for, and I think that happens to a greater degree in British politics too.
Yeah,
it's about holding back from that constant need to self-aggrandize when really all we end up with is just polarization between these opposing forces. It's kind of stand away from the image and address the am I disappearing down that hole? Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, obviously, people are listening to this in the future, but like over the last week, where we had all these people who brought together and made Brexit kind of happen, have all kind of jumped ship almost a month before the big day when it's like, that's it, it's all over. And you're thinking, it's a bit like, and you've obviously been in the work world, where someone has a bad idea, but they're in a managerial position. You think, I don't want to be the person who picks that up, but then you end up having to pick it up, and they kind of leave and get a better job. And you're thinking, God, what they've left us is an absolute mess, And it feels a bit like that at this moment, It's like you get the message over, make sure the message is clear. We'll get this. As long as it kind of hits the headlines in the papers, don't worry about the details. The last election, Brexit, and suddenly he's thinking, right, all these brilliant brains have just buggered off.
Yeah, I mean that song's really about how it looks, not about how it really is. And
yes,
what's seen to be happening rather than what's happening. It's almost if you can spin it hard enough, people will believe it.
Well, absolutely.
It's a really disturbing thing when you think about it. We used to expect, some kind of rational, evidence-based politics, and people used to meet in the middle a little bit. But now it's just so polarized that I think that's what that album's about. I got a track on there called "Pop Music for Ugly People," which was a very famous quote called "Show Business for Ugly People," which was I can't remember who quoted it, but it was somebody's assessment of what politicians are. So that's what they're involved in. It's just pop music for ugly people.
Well, no. Anyway, we all sort of just before we move on to the new album, but I do think this you must get in Princess Nut Nut. I think that's the classic one for any future song, Princess Nut Nut, which is kind of the thing that broke the back of this latest kind of genius who got kicked out of number 10 with his box of stationery. Did you know about that? What he was writing about Boris's girlfriend?
He was writing about. I know he slandered Boris's partner.
Yeah, he referred to.
I haven't read what he actually wrote.
Well, I think he referred to as Princess Nut Nut was his kind of reference. So I think when Boris saw this, it was like literally like.
That's a great title.
Brilliant title, Princess Nut Nut.
Princess Nut Nut.
And that was the architect of Brexit out the door. So it's more of a game than politics. It's like being in the primary school playground of calling each other names, isn't it? It's got down to that level, Princess Nut Nut.
I can just picture Boris's face when he discovered it.
Yes, it's like, right, that's it.
They're way more cartoon-like than they ever were.
Yes, I know. So look, hoping that next year is slightly different and possibly better. I mean, with the new album coming out, you've got a more of a solid band.
Well, since I got back to Worcester, I've been back here 4 years now. So yeah, I met some musicians that I'm happy with, and with this new album, the drummer is playing on about 6 or 7 of the tracks. To be fair, I think I'm playing most of the other stuff. But live, we've just recorded a live album. Did I mention that as well?
No.
Called Loose. That's out. That's just come out. That was recorded live in the studio in September. Socially distanced and all that kind of thing. But so that's out now as well. That's live versions of the more noisier bits of the back catalogue. Some stuff off While You Still Can, and one new song called Grayson, which is about Grayson Perry, which is on the artist only.
Absolutely. You've got to put Grayson in, otherwise, you know, it's just...
Grayson's kind of just one of life's inspiring characters, and it's great to write a song that's about inspiration rather than, you know, picking on Diane. I didn't pick on Diane, really. I didn't think. I'm sure she'd see the funny side of it, should she?
Yeah, she's happy anyway. So look, what would you? I mean, because you're such a sort of different career path on the music front. I mean, if you were able to say something to an 18-year-old self, I just wondered what that would be.
Well, I'd say, I'd remind him that it's actually about hard work and connections, and a lot of the work isn't about just writing the songs or being able to do it. You've got to try and connect. I mean, I think it's a little easier to start off in terms of connections now for younger bands. The problem is there's just so many of them, and it's how you stand out. I mean, I still don't know how to stand out, really. I mean, I haven't stood out. I still don't sell masses of records, or I probably don't tweet enough, or I don't do enough posts, or
yes,
there's a million things you're meant to do now. I mean, the producer that I'm working with at the moment, a guy called Matt, he's just about to start working with I think she's come second. She may even have won the German version of The Voice. It's not his kind of thing at all, but I mean, he likes a bit of pop stuff. But she's got 500,000 followers on Instagram, and like we were saying, well, she's in it, isn't she? You need to work with someone like that, because it's all that it's just taken over, really.
The influence.
There was that band recently that came over from America on the strength of False Hype. It was something I was reading about, and they booked a load of gigs over here. So probably maybe a year ago, and they came to do all the gigs, and nobody turned up because they got booked simply because they'd got rich parents who bought YouTube likes and Facebook likes. So all their social media looked astronomical.
Yes,
with all faked. So that's the other thing with that world. I'm getting emails all the time. You increase your 100,000 SoundCloud followers for $39 on offer this week. You fancy that? I mean, it's and obviously people are doing it because they need to create that kind of digital. It's about the PR being more important than the actual product.
Yes. Well, I can realise, and this is not a good thing about looking back and feeling like it was better, but you had these influencers. You had John Peel, gatekeepers, not influencers. Sorry.
Yes.
Influencers are the kind of the Instagram crowd and the Fire Festival and all that kind of stuff. No, you had the gatekeepers. So you had John Peel. You got all these kind of nerdy people like me going, oh, you're recording on their TDK D90 cassette, and that would give them that kind of audience and the ability to get booked at Norwich Arts Centre or Leeds or, Leicester. You would just be able to get 100, 200 people come and see that band because John Peel played them, or they had a session, that first album. And then the NME was kind of also, you had 4 weekly papers as well. So, that all helped create something, but it was kind of, at least it was real rather than fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, that actually happened, the John Peel thing, that was music played and reactions and connections. But it's like the middleman's been bypassed in the new word process, or can be, by manufactured numbers.
Yes, which is always very strange. But anyway, look, this has been fantastic.
Without sounding like, you don't want to sound like too cynical.
No, but it's kind of, I suppose, it's kind of like, well, things are better in the sense that people can get the music out there. But then, as you said, it's such a big diluted ocean now that it's like, how do you get seen? But then you've got a CV, which is very impressive. So then at least you've got that, which I think most people I speak to wonder how young kids would even make any money. Whereas in the old days, they would at least cover their costs and not make any money.
Sure.
Did you manage to navigate the world of publishing, by the way, and ownership?
Yeah, well, I just, most of my PRS submissions are mostly just, because mostly I'm just writing the songs and demoing them here, so I don't have a massive shared publishing history. Apart from if I've made records with people and I've paid them in split PRS. People tend not to do that quite so much with me nowadays because they're not convinced we're going to get it back. But every now and again it goes well, yeah, I have a music collections company that collects worldwide for me, and they find, one of my songs has been played in Mexico, which fascinated me. I have no idea why. Or Australia.
Yes, absolutely.
But
is there a particular period or album that gets played more than others?
Well, funnily enough, the Growing Up with Vinny Peculiar album seems to still be played. Some of the others fall more by the way. So, the Down the Bright Stream, English Village, it's been played a few times, but that's because it's called English Village and it crops up on TV.
Yes.
Once in a while. Well, I say it crops up. I think it's been played twice. I'm not really in the, if there are any publishers listening, don't panic. I'm not going to steal anybody's slots. But you're welcome to get in touch if you want.
Absolutely.
If you want quirky songs to place in massive films. Yes.
This is it. Everyone wants that Nick Lowe moment, don't they? With What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding.
Sure.
That got put.
Great song.
Yes, put on the Bodyguard soundtrack. Suddenly that was the pension plan, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think people. I think that's one of the joys of music in some ways, is that you never quite know what people are going to want at any given time. And sometimes you can move things forward in the least expected ways.
Yes.
It's that kind of random reinforcement thing that keeps people going sometimes. Because a lot of it is tedium and disappointment, as well as excitement and possibility. And they're quite a long way apart sometimes. And that's why I think musicians are a little high and low, Mood-wise, it's very easy to start believing in something that's not going to happen and not believing in something that somehow does happen.
Yes. And it's also, as we obviously say, just lastly, I mean, it is kind of odd in the sense that people like, Bowie matured and was so brilliant right through to the end. And then poor old Morrissey seemed to go from being like, wow, this is an amazing character for this. Why? How did that happen? Do people like Andy and Mike kind of think, yeah, that was a bit strange, or do they just never speak about it?
Well, I haven't seen Andy for a long time. Andy's in New York now. I don't really speak to Andy that much. Speak to Mike. Don't really talk a lot about Morrissey or anything, to be fair.
No. Probably a difficult subject.
I think Mike I'm not sure whether Mike read the book. I read the Morrissey book, and we had I mean, if you've read it, you'll know there's a chapter I think that Mike gets. It's just not the most flattering chapter in the world, but I don't think he's let it bother him too much.
No,
we haven't dissected it with him.
No, I don't think it's best. Don't give it to him as a present.
No.
I did read it. It made me laugh, but it was just like, quite extreme in its.
And I think one of the most extreme elements is his demand to be a Penguin classic before it had been released. Says something about his ego.
Yes.
He demanded that it was a Penguin classic, else he was going to go to a different publisher. So, I mean, sort of, it's rather assuming. I mean,
yeah. Well, I suppose what was quite interesting, that everything from school right through, all these incidences, just like everything worked against him in every situation. There was never once that he felt like, oh yeah, that went well,
I always remember their album. We're at number 2. I blame Jeff. He didn't do this. We're only at number 2. The whole world is thinking, number 2 is pretty good, isn't it? And he's basically having a go at Jeff Travis for being number 2.
Yeah, Jeff gets it along.
It's a little bit harsh, really. I mean, I think Jeff must have done something right. I think most people think.
Yeah. Anyway, he's been through a lot. But look, this has been fantastic. So look, when I put it out, can I can send you a link, and then you can put it on your social media platform.
Yeah, no, please do. Yeah.
And that would be great. But look, best of luck for the next year, and hopefully.
Well, it's been a very pleasant chat. It feels like we're kind of old mates. I know I'm a bit older than you, but I get the whole Smiths thing. And,
yes. Well, I it was kind of interesting because that 83 to 87 I felt was like a kind of a golden period, which I got and I loved it. I didn't really get the next bit so much, but it kind of built up from punk, post-punk, that Orange Juice, I suppose it was Orange Juice, wasn't it, that a lot of people were very influenced by, and then suddenly the Smiths appeared.
I did some nice gigs with that, but not long before it got ill.
Yeah, and it was just good, and we've just kind of been lucky that we've had.
I love your analysis about my career in reverse.
Yes.
So all to look forward to. So it made me feel even more positive.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you must see all these other bands, like the other day there was Davey Woodward from the Brilliant Corners who's just got an album out, and everyone seems to have now got a new album out, which is great. I think everyone's done their career, and it's just brilliant that people are still feeling.
Because music never really goes away. It's like once you've kind of thought, well, I think I can do this, you don't realise that it then becomes an intrinsic need, and you end up doing it.
Yes.
Because you kind of have to.
I know. Well, it's with a lot of those indie bands, it's like, but you've done nothing since then. But it's like, oh yeah, but I play music all the time, but I'm just not going to put it out because I've got a day job, and it's but I do love playing. You're thinking, okay. And so some people, I was really surprised. I did an interview with the drummer from the Sundays, and he did sort of say, well, we have occasionally got together quite recently and recorded a few bits. It's like, my God, okay. And it's like, well, that might be it, because the main characters kind of don't want to do it again, kind of thing. It's like, we're the Sundays, we're back. And it's like, they're thinking, no, I'm quite happy with my life now. We've kind of got a nice thing.
Yeah, never got to that stage. I've always wanted to. I don't think I've had enough disappointment yet. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe disappointment is something that I'm so used to. It hasn't destroyed me. Do you know what I mean? I still feel optimistic when I still feel sometimes. When I finish a record, I think, am I ever going to be able to do this again? I really need to start promoting this. And then, as the life of the record takes off, I get a little bit of interest, get some reviews, and then I hit this other next period and think, well, is it worth it? But it always is.
Yeah.
Which is strange.
It is strange.
But so anyway, I'm wishing.
Yeah. Anyway, look, Tim's on the phone. Indeed, Tim is on the phone. Right. Anyway, I thought I'd leave that in because Tim Kept interrupting halfway through that interview, or most of it really. Anyway, Tim, never mind. That, dear listener, is the end of the interview. Thank you ever so much to Vinny Peculiar for giving me the time for that chat. Anyway, there you go. Everything you ever need to know about Vinny is all there. Make notes. Right, this has been David Eastaugh. Probably said that. Anyway, if you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, C86 Show. Check it out. Well, make it nice anyway. And also, all these interviews have been archived. You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.